The honourable member for Cape Breton-Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise today to speak to Bill 107, which is an act to amend Chapter 1 of the revised statutes 1989, the House of Assembly Act respecting committees. And to clarify yet again what we are asking here, and it's a bill put forth obviously by our caucus, we are asking that thank you very much, that all meetings of the Standing Committee of the House of Assembly must be televised by legislative television unless held in camera. So, Mr. Speaker, there's a couple of things that I want to say here, well, probably more than a couple, knowing myself, but several things that I want to say here today. But the first thing that pops to mind, especially after hearing commentaries by our member from Clare Digby, and I thank him for his commentaries and his viewpoints that he put forward on this. But one thing that jumped out at me is basically his words using reckless. That there's something reckless in us putting forward a bill without taking into full consideration what the costs are going to be associated in enacting, what we are asking for and televising all standing committees in this legislature. Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that there's anything reckless in trying to look at making what happens in the work of this House more accessible to the people that live in the province of Nova Scotia. The honourable member here from the NDP caucus, and if somebody can help me out, her constituency is? Dartmouth South, thank you very much. Our House Leader from the NDP caucus mentioning that it's important that those people that live in this province, and I come from a constituency that takes me almost 4 hours to drive home, that it is accessible to all people in this province. And I sometimes think that when we are standing or sitting in this House, we live in a bubble a little bit when we're here, or maybe it's a vacuum. I'm not sure which one is a better descriptor. But the reality is that most people have never sat, have never visited. Most people actually barely ever get to Nova Scotia who live in the rural parts of our province. They have work lives. They have things to do. They have children to take care of. They have responsibilities. And for a lot of people, it's expensive also to travel to Halifax to just take in one day of House proceedings. When I ask constituents to come forward, if I have a bill that I'm putting forward, or the caucus is putting a bill forward that's relevant to them, or if there's a matter that I'm speaking to the House about with relevance to my community, and I'm blessed to have someone from the constituency of Cape Breton-Richmond who make their way all the way to this House, I'm extremely grateful because I know what it takes to take a day off, as well as to drive, almost 8 hours, return trip to get back and forth here. It's a huge commitment for a constituent to be able to do that. So for the sheer fact that our business is done in a chamber that exists in Halifax makes it not accessible to everyone in the province. So I would hope that we would try to do everything that we can as members representing all corners of our province to try and make what happens in this House as accessible as possible to everyone equally within the province of Nova Scotia. Now, Mr. Speaker, this year, and we had some wonderful events for which we were hosted here in this chamber. We had a reenactment a bit earlier on, the beginning of the year, because this year is the 200th anniversary of Province House. What an extraordinary thing. I think it was February 11th that this beautiful house was actually opened for the first time, and we should all be very proud that this is the oldest legislative house in all of Canada. It's an extraordinary structure. It's beautiful. It's a piece of historical architecture within the province. However, with that said, Mr. Speaker, when it opened up its doors for the first time, because before that, the business of the House was being done in several different locations back in 1819 when it was first opened up. Lord Dalhousie, at that time, and I'm going to read this quote that he said. Lord Dalhousie said that, and he was referring to the structure, "It stands and will stand, I hope, to the latest posterity, a proud record of the public spirit at this period of our history." Now, that was 200 years ago, Mr. Speaker, and a lot has changed, obviously, in the last 200 years. It's important, obviously, to hold fast to traditions that are very important to this House. And Hansard, for a very long time, has been, it started off that people would actually handwrite things in books and, inscribe things by hand. We've moved past that now to obviously have audio. Some of our aspects within this House are now televised, as is happening at this moment. And when we ask special permission, we can have televised meetings as well within the Red Chamber. So for those people who don't know and who are listening right now, this is the main chamber, and we have the red room on the other side where we do sub-supply, and we have other events that happen, plus law amendments and other committee meetings happen there as well. We also have a committee room across the road in one government house where Hansard is already set up, audio is already set up. So when the member across from Claire Digby again says that it seems that we're being a bit reckless in putting forward a bill where we haven't I suppose, our due diligence from his perspective regarding the costs associated in doing so, I would argue, Mr. Speaker, that many aspects of what really needs to be done here have likely already been put into place, so that I don't know that the costs are actually going to be that great, but I would hope that somewhere within our budget from this year that we could actually find on this 200th anniversary of this incredible building and of our fine tradition actually taking root physically in this particular spot, that we could find a bit of money to be able to make accessible all of the good work that happens in this House, because my argument, Mr. Speaker, to that, and it's coming to my mind right now, that the true spirit of transparency in this House and our goal should be that the work of this House, we should remember, in fact, that the work of this House belongs to the people of this province. The work of this House belongs to the people of this province. It does not belong to only those of us who have the privilege to be able to sit in this chamber, in this chair. I may have this seat, but the only reason that I have a seat in this legislature is because of those people who have put their trust in me to be able to come here. They voted me in, and they have entrusted me to come here and to reflect what it is that they need, their values, their hopes for the future. They are looking to me to be their voice within this chamber, a place that's referred to as the People's House. Now, if this is the People's House, and I know there's a lot of folks who are not living in Nova Scotia any longer, they may be living out in Alberta or in other places, I know that one aspect that they love to do is, when they have a moment, is be able to check in on what's happening at home. In fact, when I post my small clips from Legislative TV, I'm always astounded at how many people, in fact, let me know that they have watched these clips that are not even still in Nova Scotia. Some people have just are enjoying finding out what's going on from another province. So as much as we actually may think that Legislative TV is not popular and there may be voter apathy out there across the province, well, perhaps it was it 53% overall voter turnout? Well, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps I live in a very special situation at home in Cape Breton, Richmond, but I'm very proud to say that we were just shy of 80% of voter turnout in Cape Breton, Richmond. And I can tell you that when I went to every single door that I was blessed enough to meet someone who was at home, I never asked anyone to vote for me as a member of the Progressive Conservative Party. I just asked them, Mr. Speaker, to get out to vote. To get out to vote. So in a very little, minor way, I hope that I was able to actually encourage and be a small part of that amazing, amazing voter turnout in my constituency. I'm not mentioning anything about that. Sorry, just a recommendation by a colleague of mine. So I'm very proud of that voter turnout. I have about 5 minutes left here, Mr. Speaker, and I guess I want to talk about going back to like the modernization of the way that we do business in this House. The modernization of the way that we do business in this House. I hear sighs from across the room, so I'm hoping that I'm not boring you too much by going on here for an extra 5 minutes. You know what? We all have to do renovations to our homes every once in a while. Every once in a while, if you're going to maintain things, if you're going to maintain your house properly, you have to put a new roof on, you have to do some renos, you have to put in some capital investment. Well, we're asking for a bit of an investment here, Mr. Speaker, in order to be able to actually modernize this House, again, the people's House. So part of that renovation process, Mr. Speaker, I think would be extremely valuable to be able to actually have as much information as possible available to all Nova Scotians and to even people, like I was saying before, even beyond the borders of this province. You know, as far as that modernization process, I'd like to talk actually a bit about how this chamber is actually set up, which it was astounding to me when I found this out, and perhaps all members here know, but maybe not everybody at home knows, that, you know, we're actually set up physically in this House to be adversarial. I'm not an adversarial person by nature. I love consensus building. I love it when everybody can like leave from a meeting and feel like they've got a little bit of something to take with them, that they feel like they've won something, you know, a bit by leaving. If everybody can go home by feeling that they've actually gained something through the process, I think we tend to have a better outcome. So in this chamber on its own, and I know it's based on tradition, and it's an important tradition, but it's based on the tradition when, well, I wouldn't have been able to like sit in this House because I'm a woman. It's based on the tradition of men sitting in this House. It's actually based on the tradition of having the opposition and the government being two sword lengths away from one another in the way things are set up. That in itself, if we think about it, is not in keeping in the spirit of perhaps the way that we should be doing business any longer. I understand, again, that tradition is extremely important, but I also understand from having the very good fortune of visiting in the fall with some of my colleagues here in the House and across Canada, the very good fortune of visiting Nunavut. I was in Iqaluit. And in Iqaluit, the legislature is set up in an extraordinary way. It's one of only two places that has, where I guess they don't play party politics, I guess where we do everywhere else. And they have a system where all members sit as independents. Now, I'm not suggesting that should be the case here, but what I loved about my visit there is the way that actually they have the legislators set up. They have it set up so that you feel welcome walking in. It's not a them and us type of situation. It's everybody actually can face one another. Nobody has their back to anybody else. And behind, in the back row of where members sit, it's actually encouraged for the children to come and be present, as well as the elders in the community. It's an extraordinary thing to see in a place that has a little bit more of a modern system of the way that business is done and how they're set up, which I think makes a really big difference in the end in the way that, you know, overall you feel when you're doing business within that particular structure. So I'm going to end this with only a couple of seconds left here, Mr. Speaker. Again, the spirit of true transparency, as far as I'm concerned, is that to make sure that the work of this House belongs to the people of this province. So this is my moment to speak up, Mr. Speaker, and asking us to open up the process as much as we can so that the people in this province can have access. They can come out to vote with having as much information to be able to make the correct decisions before they put their X on that ballot next time around, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.